I'm going to call this a foolproof brisket recipe. So for the last few weeks, I've been working on a brisket recipe that is just foolproof. And my whole goal of it is to make sure that the way that I'm teaching it, or the way that I've got it laid out, see if my theory works, is universal for any kind of cooker. And so I've cooked multiple briskets on my offset, my Old Country pecos. I've cooked multiple briskets on my Weber kettle, and I've cooked multiple briskets on my GMG Jim Bowie. And with all that, I have found the exact recipe, the exact method that is replicable, and it turns out absolutely amazing every single time. So stick with me, let's jump in. Yeah, so as I said, I think I found this exact recipe. You could duplicate it every single time, no matter what cooking apparatus you're using, whether it's a pellet grill, whether it's an offset smoker, whether it's your Weber kettle, whatever it is you're using. This method has proven over and over again for me to be effective, and it has everything to do with consistent temperatures, smoke flavor, and a prolonged hold. This prolonged hold is going to be huge for the outcome of these briskets, and I've done it about 8 times now, and they've all turned out really amazing, and these are all select briskets. With our Old Country pecos and our Weber kettle, the only thing that we did was we calculated 45 minutes per pound at 275 degrees. 45 minutes per pound, 275 degrees. At that point, you don't have to check it for temperature. You don't have to check it for internal temperature. You don't have to check it for anything like that. Grab it, wrap it in foil or paper. I found that I like the paper a little bit better than the foil if I'm adding butter or tallow to it while it's resting, because it does allow that bark to not get too soggy, but it also allows it to absorb the flavor of that tallow or the butter. And then place it in what I use is an electric smoker. If you have a food proofer, you could use that, and you hold it for 12 to 16 hours, and it's worked out outstandingly. Now, the only difference in the 45 minutes per pound at 275 degrees would be with your pellet smoker, and the only reason that we have to change that is because the pellet smokers, at least with my Green Mountain grills and the experiences that I have with them, they stay so even all the way across the board. Your temperature might fluctuate 5-10 degrees, and that was about it. Whereas with a stick burner, or even with your Weber or anything else, you can fluctuate 10, 15, maybe even 20 degrees as you're changing and adding wood or charcoal. So the consistency with the pellet smoker actually speeds up the cook a little bit. But we all know with pellet smokers, you don't always get the flavor of the smoke or the wood. So 2 hours at 200 degrees, and then 45 minutes per pound at 275 after you have 2 hours at 200 degrees. Now that 200 degrees for 2 hours, that's going to do 2 things. That's going to allow more smoke flavor than what you're usually getting in a pellet smoker, but you're also going to be getting better bark, because it's going to be drying that exterior out just a little bit and allowing that convection to really build a good bark. Now, I've made a lot of really good briskets on a pellet smoker, but they don't always have a great bark, and this way I've found it blows it out of the water. Now, when I say 2 hours at 200 and then 45 minutes per pound at 275, include those 2 hours at 200, because they count towards that in process goal. You're not adding 2 hours to the whole process. All you're doing is changing the temperature from 200 to 275. And so you're going to be going 45 minutes per pound across the whole thing, but those first 2 hours are going to be at 200 degrees. Okay, so say it's a 10-pound brisket. And so you got 45 minutes per pound. That's 450 minutes. So that's 450 minutes divided by 60. That's 7.5 hours. So a 10-pound brisket is going to take 7.5 hours with this method. So 2 hours it's going to be, and this is trimmed weight. This is not the pre-trim weight. This is trimmed weight. So the actual poundage of your brisket. Poundage. 2 hours at 200 degrees, and then you got 5.5 hours at 275. That's a 7.5 hour brisket, and then you're going to be doing the long hold for 12 to 16 hours. That's the only difference between the pellet smoker, the offset, the Weber that I have found. And like I said, I've cooked 8 briskets between all of these, and I have found these to be very true, and this theory to work out very, very well. Now, the only thing that I would change in this is I did a second offset brisket. I did an overnight dry brine before I cooked it, and I found that brisket to be way too salty. And I think it's because the rub that I put on there, not only did the dry brine pull in some of that salty flavor, but also the rub that I put on there had some salt on it, and as you do a prolonged hold, that long rest, that salt absorbs down into the meat as well. As we're used to having a lot of flavor on the bark, this had a lot of flavor all the way throughout, and it was just a little bit too much, so I would not suggest dry brining a brisket that you're going to do a prolonged hold on, because it's going to continue doing that. It's basically brining itself during the prolonged hold, and you have the potential of making it too salty. And yeah, I mean, it's still edible. Put a little sauce on it, chop it up, put it in a burrito, and it's good. But you know, wasn't for me. So that's the only thing that I changed with my method. No dry brining. I've gotten to where I do use about 3 parts pickle juice and 1 part mustard for a binder, and that does a few things with the pH of the protein itself, as far as tenderness and the bark building and things like that. It's not just for binding the spices on there. Obviously, we all know that you can bind spices onto a piece of protein without any binders, but the pH, that lowering that pH with the acidity of the mustard and the vinegar and all that from the pickle juice, it does change the texture. It does change the bark. It does change the outcome. Not everybody's taste buds can differentiate that. Not everybody's tongues can differentiate that, and that's okay. But for those of us who can, we do see and notice those differences. But this is an amazing process and a really great recipe for an amazing brisket every single time. Every time I made these and followed this process. This is 8 briskets in a row. I've sliced into it a select brisket. Cheap. Sliced into it. It was tender, it was moist, it was flavorful, and it had an amazing bark. So, yeah, it's foolproof. I'm going to call this a foolproof brisket recipe. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I helped you out. I love you guys. Make sure you like, you subscribe if you haven't done so already, and make sure you drink more water.